Cador's Pacific Region, podcast number 13, Nanaimo. In this episode, we speak with Rob about a near miss between two Cessna 172s, a Cessna 152 striking treetops during a nighttime approach, and a Dash 8 pilot's request not to be told what to do by flight service, all at Nanaimo. I'm Brad Crockett, a low-time private pilot. Joining me is Rob Nabieszko. Rob holds an ATPL, has flown numerous aircraft types, including the Dash 8, and currently flies the Embraer 175. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me here, Brad.
The Nanaimo Airport is located on the east coast of Vancouver Island, 2 nautical miles inland of Ladysmith Harbour. Runway 1634 is asphalt, 6,600 feet long and 150 feet wide. The aerodrome elevation is 92 feet. The circuit is modified for terrain. The downwind leg is 2 nautical miles from the runway. It's elongated for 3-4, and it's at 1,200 feet. Runway 3-4 circuits are to the right. The aerodrome is Class Echo with an MF and has flight service during the day and an ATF at night. The Victoria Terminal Class Charlie is immediately above, starting at 2,500. Our first report is Cador's number 1999 P0311. Nav Canada reports that on June 23, 1999, at 400 Zulu, the Vital Aviation Cessna 172, registration Golf Tango X-Ray Alpha, reported 10 nautical miles southeast of Nanaimo, inbound for a full stop. Flight Service issued flight advisory information. A few minutes later, the Silver Bullet contracting Cessna 172, registration Golf Hotel Kilo Victor, reported having a near miss with TXA while lining up for runway 34. HKV had not reported being within the mandatory frequency area. His last transmission indicated being well outside the MF. That's the end of the report. Rob, it sounds like HKV had called flight service when they were too far out. Is that what happened?
Well, it's kind of hard to say just because Cadors are, by their nature, generally very light on the details. So it's hard to say whether he made a call earlier or whether flight service was just familiar with HKV from previous calls.
When we're arriving at a field with a flight service station, what can we do to reduce the risk of this kind of conflict?
Well, the most important thing to always remember when operating at an uncontrolled airport, whether monitored by flight service or not, is that communication is still only the second best tool for avoiding collisions, the most important and most vital always being the pilot's eyes. Flight service and even ATC can give us a heads up on where to look for the traffic, but we still need to spot the airplane ourselves and do whatever we need to avoid a collision. We also have to recall that flight service may not be aware of traffic in the area if the airplane is Nordo, maybe on the wrong frequency, or maybe makes a mistake in their call-up saying 10 miles east when they're actually 10 miles west. So the most important thing is really just to be aware of that warm and fuzzy feeling you get when you think someone else is actually watching out for traffic. Always keep scanning the air for unreported traffic.
Our second report is Cador's number 2001 P0028. Nav Canada and the Transportation Safety Board report that on January 17, 2001 at 0210 Zulu, the Parallel Aviation Cessna 152, registration Golf Bravo X-Ray Juliet, was on approach for landing runway 16 at Nanaimo with a flight instructor and a student on board. The sun had set 41 minutes prior to the approach and visibility was 6 statute miles. During the base leg, which was flown by the student, the instructor noted that the PAPI lights were all red and reapplied power, but did not observe the altimeter. During the turn to final, the instructor noted trees below the aircraft. During the final approach, the PAPI lights were observed to be all red, but the runway lights were continuously in sight with no obstructions observed. The altimeter was not observed. Shortly thereafter, branches were illuminated by the aircraft's landing light, followed by the left wing striking the branches. The aircraft yawed slightly to the left, and the instructor took control and landed the aircraft without further incident. A replacement wing has been ordered. That's the end of the report. Rob, when did things start to go wrong?
Well, first off, I just want to say that I'm just happy that no one was seriously injured in this. This could have been a very different report, just to read through what happened here. But it sounds like right from the start, the approach was flown kind of low, and it sounds like the instructor recognized it very early on. He noticed the PAPIs repeatedly and made minor attempts to correct, but was probably trying to coach the student through the correction instead and try to encourage the student to make the correction. And the fact that it was obviously night definitely played a role in this, as the trees were not seen until too late. Without the visual clues we're used to, including a well-defined horizon during the day, it becomes much harder to fly an accurate, safe approach at night, and we must rely on all the visual cues and trust a lot of them, including the PAPIs.
What can we learn from this incident?
The biggest thing, I think, is that we must be extra vigilant at night to always make sure we're flying at a safe altitude, whether it's reading the charts carefully to see what the minimum obstruction altitude is, or when we're flying an approach, using the visual guidance system, or even an ILS glide slope, even if you're not an IFR pilot, just to ensure that you're on a 3-degree slope and that you're maintaining a proper 3-degree slope to the runways. With the PAPIs, the phrase is all red, you're dead. And with 4, all you know for sure is that you are at least a half a degree low below the ideal glide slope, but you could be much lower than that. At 4 red, without visual cues, a correction has to be made immediately, and even a go-round is not unreasonable if you don't see a white PAPI in very short order after you make the correction. Obstacles near an airport can penetrate up to a 1.5 degree slope below the approach to a runway, so 4 red does not guarantee any kind of obstacle clearance.
Do you think the fact that this was a training flight contributed to the incident?
I absolutely do. The instructor, it was mentioned several times in the report that the instructor noted that they were low, and he even attempted to make a correction. But as a flight instructor myself, and as a captain who's mentored many people over the years, you always try to give other pilots, the benefit of the doubt to try and correct a situation themselves and learn from the situation themselves. And that's a very hard call to make for a lot of instructors on when to take over. When has a student let the safety margin diminish too much and not been able to react quickly enough? When do you take over? That's probably the hardest thing for most instructors to learn. I remember when I did my flight instructor ride, and the examiner gave me a bunch of scenarios trying to see how long before I would interrupt an exercise going wrong. And it's a very hard thing for an instructor to learn. So I definitely think that the fact it was training contributed to this. And the most important thing when you're an instructor, especially, or any kind of training position, is never let a student go to the point where safety is compromised. If you have any doubt that safety has been compromised, take over, correct it, and discuss it, debrief it, and try to learn from it that way.
Our final report is Cador's number 2004 P0548. NAV Canada reports that on April 18, 2004 at 1910 Zulu, a Piper Cherokee, registration Foxtrot Yankee Zulu Whiskey, was inbound from the southeast. They advised that they would join downwind runway 16 for a touch and go and then depart eastbound. Approximately 3 minutes later, a Dash 8-100 operating as Jazz 8269 called inbound from the northeast. Flight Service provided the Dash 8 with an airport advisory and traffic information. The Dash 8 elected for a left base, runway 16. Flight Service advised the Dash 8 that, if they kept their speed up, they would probably be ahead of the Cherokee. However, the Dash 8 kept their pattern wide. Flight Service gave the Cherokee a traffic update, who elected to turn left base for a 1-mile final. The Dash 8, who was about to turn a 4-mile final, commented, quote, "This is an uncontrolled airport. I wish you would not tell aircraft what to do," unquote. Neither aircraft was given an instruction by Flight Service, but were provided with positive traffic information only. The Dash 8 elected to make a 360-degree turn in the vicinity of the Nanaimo NDB. The Cherokee made a touch and go at 1912 Zulu. The Dash 8 landed at 1914. That's the end of the report. What should we expect from Flight Service in this situation?
Well, it's funny to read this report too, because this report was most likely submitted by the Flight Service specialist who was operating at the time. So it's interesting to read the fact that he believes that he only provided positive traffic information only, which is his job. This is exactly what we should expect. His job is to provide information to aircraft so that they can determine how best to operate at the uncontrolled airport. He doesn't give instructions, but just tells everybody where to look for everybody else. A lot of them take it a little bit further and just give some advice based on your current rate of progress. It looks like you're going to land at this time. Looks like you're going to be ahead or behind this aircraft. But it did not sound to me like he was giving anyone instruction, just simply suggesting that based on the timing he was seeing, this was how it was going to work out. To me, it sounds like the Dash 8 in this case was the Dash 8 pilot was perhaps a little bit irate about something else. You never know what people are bringing to work with them, and it sounds to me like that's what happened in this case. Something else that probably happened earlier in the day, and he was a little bit unhappy and took it out, unfortunately, on this flight service specialist.
When flight service is operating, what can pilots do in the control zone to stay as safe as possible?
Well, again, the thing to keep in mind is that it is an uncontrolled airport. The flight service specialist is not in charge of anything that happens in the air, but they will do their best to provide as much information as they can to help pilots make good decisions. At the end of the day, though, it's up to the pilots to make good decisions. When you've got multiple pilots flying in a uncontrolled control zone, it's important to work together. And if in doubt, yield the right of way to others. It immediately makes you look intelligent, classy, and courteous, and it saves a lot of the effort. When you come up to a stop sign and everyone stops at the same time, the person who waves the other one person to go is usually the person who's viewed as the most courteous, and I would say the same in this situation. If you're not sure who's going to get there first, just give way, let the other person who doesn't speak up first have the right of way and get out of your way, and then at least you know where they are as well.
That's it for this episode. You can reach Rob and the podcast by email at podcast@cadores.ca. Rob's YouTube channel is CAPTNABS. Rob, thanks for this.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. I'm happy to help.
And thank you for listening as we exercise our license to learn. Please note that for the most part, Transport Canada Cadores reports contain preliminary, unconfirmed data which can be subject to change. This podcast is provided by cadores.ca, not by NAV Canada or Transport Canada.